Ahmed Best. He saw Rob Coleman on the set of Star Wars Episode 2, and he talked to him about what are you going to do with this Dooku and Yoda fight. And it seemed that Rob was, I guess, frustrated at the time, or just kind of stuck, figuring out how he was going to make this character that was initially a puppet, and he's very short and he's old and he's going to be fighting Dooku and moving around. So how was he going to do this? And so what happened was one of the first things Ahmed Best invited Rob to his house. He said, come over to the crib, he said. And they watched some videos. They watched some old movies to get some inspiration on how this was going to work. Some of the things that they watched, Ahmed, he is a big anime fan, as am I. And so they watched some 1980s anime. They showed a quick clip of one of the animes they showed, and it looked to be 1980s. It looked to be whether it was Gundam Wing or Voltron, and they were using their swords. I couldn't tell which particular anime it was. They didn't show a credit, but they showed that they watched. They also watched some Bruce Lee movies. They watched The Swordsman 2, a movie that came out back in 1992 and starred Jet Li. And the clip that they showed, the swords. They were fighting their swords in their samurai outfits, but flying all around as they were flying and hitting their swords. And then the inspiration started to come with the flying of the swords and how they were fighting in that movie. That's where you get the movement of Yoda kind of flying, going all up around with his lightsaber in the battle with Dooku. So you get that. And then also another thing is they showed George Lucas, of course, he is the creator of Star Wars, the director of those original films. And that is why we have what we have because of George Lucas and many of the people. But he was sitting at a computer and they were working on the animation with Rob. And he suggested that he mentioned an old Clint Eastwood movies where he had the poncho or the kind of the cover or the duster, I guess, for kind of pushing it back to reveal, the gun in those Westerns. And so George said kind of to peel it back, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing, to reveal Yoda's lightsaber. When you see that part in the film in episode 2, when Yoda pulls his robe back to reveal his lightsaber, that's the inspiration that George had mentioned from a Clint Eastwood movie, those Western movies, pulling the duster back and revealing the lightsaber. And then you also had Ahmed Best. He will say one of the last things he said before they kind of went into showing that full sequence was, you have to hit your stance, like kind of like a stance, like how Bruce Lee would do. And so when you see Yoda have the lightsaber in his hand and he holds it like that and he hits that stance for a good second, and then the fight ensues, that inspiration comes from the Bruce Lee and Ahmed mentioning it. And then also, one of the last things, Rob Coleman, he said that Tim Harrington, and he was one of the lead animator for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. He had the idea for Yoda to use the Force to have the lightsaber come into his opposite hand, and then he holds the lightsaber up and it lights up. And then the fight ensues. He goes up flying and battling Dooku. So that is what went into, some of what it went into in terms of the movement of Yoda and how that was going to work, the inspiration. So as a big collaboration, Rob Coleman, Ahmed Best, Tim Harrington, George Lucas, along with many other people